Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this next webinar, which forms part of our programme to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of Brodies being here in Aberdeen. I'm really delighted that so many of you have been able to join us this morning. I'm Fiona Herrell. I'm a partner in the employment and immigration team at Brodies, and I'm based here in Aberdeen. And normally when I'm asked to deliver webinars, I'm talking about employment law and people issues. So when I was asked if I'd like to propose a topic for this anniversary series, I had to give that a little bit of thought. But it struck me that when Brodies first arrived in Aberdeen 10 years ago, it was with Colin McLaren, a real estate lawyer who'll be known to many of you, I'm sure, working from his kitchen table. Our first office was at Carden Place, and that was a traditional granite property, which originally would have been a house and had been converted into office space with desks situated in what would have been living rooms, kitchens, dining rooms, bedrooms, and so on. And as we continued to grow, we then took additional space on Carden Place, and we had colleagues split across two different offices. And that continued until we became the sole occupant of the purpose-built office in Brodies House on Union Grove in 2014. And at the time, there was much hype about the fact that we were going to have sparkling water on tap. So in that 10-year period, there has been quite a dramatic change in our workplace. And that, combined with all of the discussions that are ongoing at the moment about the impact the pandemic is going to have on where we work and how we work, got me thinking that it would be interesting to project forward 10 years and speculate as to what the workplace might look like then. Now, I have to admit at this point that we're going to really look at the workplace in terms of the office, but obviously acknowledging that there's a huge proportion of the workforce who don't work in offices. But for the purposes of today's discussion, we're really meaning the office when we talk about the workplace. So that's what we're going to try and do this morning. And I'm delighted that that task doesn't just fall to me, but that I'm joined by three speakers who individually and collectively have a wealth of knowledge and ideas and experience on this topic. So I'm just going to introduce them to you now. So we have David Bell, Commercial Director at Bureau, a market-leading office furniture and workplace solutions consultancy. David has 15 years experience of working in that industry. He's supported many clients to deliver major projects, including working with clients here in Aberdeen, and championing the circular economy and enhancing well-being at work are really at the heart of David's decision-making. So hi, David, and thanks for joining.
Hi there, thanks for having me.
Then we have Paul Mccarty, Head of Planning and Environment at Aberdeenshire Council. Paul is a chartered member of the Royal Town Planning Institute. He's got degrees in geography and urban and regional planning, and in his current role, he leads on all aspects of planning and environment for the council. He also has experience in the house building sector, having been the lead planner with Persimmon Homes, North Scotland. So hi, Paul, welcome to you.
Thank you.
And we have Dan Smith, a director at Savills. He's head of the business space department and also head of the Aberdeen office. Dan is a real estate consultant involved in the acquisition and disposal of office and industrial buildings and land. And his work includes provision of commercial development advice, strategic asset management, and commercial agency throughout the northeast of Scotland. So hi, Dan, and welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So let's get started. And I thought we should start today's discussion by thinking about what will be the single biggest driver of change in the way we work over the next 10 years. And to put some context around that question, what I was thinking about was that even before the pandemic, climate change, sustainability, advances in technology, and colleague well-being were all issues that many businesses were grappling with. The pandemic then hit and obviously brought about massive disruption for us all, not only in our personal lives, but also in our professional lives, including where and how we work. So do we think that the pandemic will be the single biggest driver of change in the way we work over the next 10 years, or will it be something else? And David, I'll start with you on that one, if that's okay. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned some other factors there, such as the environment and technology, which will certainly drive change over the coming years, but undoubtedly as well, the pandemic has certainly sped up. I think the evolving way in where we work and also how we work. I think that the environment will definitely play a key role in all of this, as well as you see a lot of businesses now globally and here in the UK putting net zero carbon targets in place, and the governments themselves also putting big targets in place around that. I guess if we sort of set the scene, and look at how we were sort of working pre-pandemic. I mean, traditionally, when the office world first started, we worked in a fairly cellular working environment, fairly hierarchical, and then as we came into sort of the late 20th century, beginning of the 21st, we started to see that change, and that changed really born out of businesses and designers looking at designing workspaces around people and understanding the way in which people work, and actually understanding that we don't all just work from our desk. We carry out all sorts of different tasks throughout the course of a day, and to help embrace that way of working, they would create all these different workspace zones throughout office spaces. So we started to see a much more open plan culture, a very less hierarchical culture. And with that as well, we started to see a much more flexible way of working, both within the private sector and within the public sector as well. And that included moves towards remote working. You had big businesses like BT, who in the early part of the 21st century, were moving to sort of a home working model. Pre-pandemic, it was 5% of the working population were working remotely. And then, March 2020 hit, and the global pandemic. And that, we all know what happened then. It was over 50% of the working population in the UK were forced to work from home. And so with that, it's obviously thrown a massive spanner in the works, and it's forced people to really rethink, how we want to work. And as you mentioned as well, technology has certainly helped with all of that. We're seeing better connectivity than ever before. We're seeing smartphone technology advancing. And we're also seeing as well the advancements in video call technology as well with all of that. So that's certainly helped. But I think it's too early for us to say right now whether or not, is this going to spark this massive change in the way that we work. I think that there's a lot more testing and a lot more data that needs to be uncovered as we start to move back into the office. At the moment, the vast majority of us are still working remotely. So I think we need to understand, the impact of when people start to come back into the office and how that plays out. And we have to look at things like people's well-being, company culture, all of these things come into it. And then looking at the environmental side of things, just going back to that, undoubtedly that's going to, I think, be one of the biggest drivers of change over the coming years. If you look at the commercial fit-out sector, 300 tons of waste per annum, goes into the ground in office fit-outs. And in the furniture world, 2 million desks and 2 million task chairs go into the ground in the UK alone. 85% of furniture globally goes into the ground. So we have a massive issue that we've got to overcome there, which we're already starting to see, businesses looking at ways in which we can do that.
Great. And Paul, then, if I can ask you to come in on that one next.
Thanks, Fiona. I think a lot of the points that David made, I will certainly echo in what I'm about to say, but I think there's so much change occurring at the one time. We've got legislative change from a plan perspective. We've got a new act. We've got a movement to National Planning Framework 4, transition towards net zero. We've got the creation and the dominance of thinking around the establishment of 20-minute neighbourhoods. So not only are we talking about changes in the way we work, the future of the workplace, but we're actually talking about significant and sustained changes to the way we view place, but also the way that we live our lives. And I think when you start to look at the transition to net zero, traditionally we're focused on the low-hanging fruit first. So promoting recycling within the workplace, reducing the level of waste, reducing the usage of paper. But in terms of the short, sharp impact of the pandemic, what we've seen is a move to paperless working, to digital working. And now what we're probably going to see over the next few months is those ad hoc processes that we put in place to maintain business continuity over the last 18 months, a progression towards more permanent processes and ways of working. So while I'm not sure if we could call the pandemic the single biggest driver of change, I think it's certainly one of the most significant catalysts that we're going to see, but not just in the workplace, but a far wider shockwave across the way we deliver our businesses, but equally the way we live our lives.
Yeah, absolutely, much more fundamental than that. What about you, Dan, if I bring you in now?
I guess coming in third to this question.
Bit tricky.
A lot of what I was going to say has been covered by the other two guys, but I think it is a good question, and it is one where there are a number of possible answers here. I think it's undisputed that the pandemic has been the single biggest driver of change ever in our working lives, and now we're on the cusp of a return to normality. Our lives will continue to be influenced by the pandemic, but we're coming to a point where we're no longer defined by it. And I think the crisis caused by the pandemic has created change of social significance, and it's accelerated things like the adoption of digital technologies, flexible working, ESG, and as you've already stated, sustainability and advances in technology and well-being will continue to be very much front and centre for most organisations. And I also believe that flexibility will be a key driver for many going forward in terms of how we work, where we work, and when we work. And there's going to be no one-size-fits-all solution to this, and every business and sector will have a different strategy for post-pandemic recovery, and each individual business will do what works best for them. But underpinning all of that is the way in which each business adopts and embraces change will ultimately be driven by the most important asset of their business, and that's the people. So to answer your question, I guess people will be the single biggest driver of change in the way we work over the next 10 years, in my view. So.
Yeah, no, and that's a really good way of sort of looking at it. And I mean, there was an article in The Guardian yesterday, just sort of picking up on what you were saying there, Dan, about it's not necessarily working from home which is making people feel fatigued, but actually it's trying to replicate the office environment and having this very linear day when you're in a home environment where you don't have the normal demarcations that you would otherwise have had in terms of a commute or putting on your work suit or whatever it is that sort of signals to you the start and end of your day. Your day therefore bleeds, and therefore that is sort of part of the problem, I guess, with people working from home on a longer term basis. That's probably echoing just what you're saying there. Yeah. And so in terms of then what we might see more or less of, if we start with you on this one, Dan, in terms of actual office space, I mean, some people have come out and said, we think the office is dead. That doesn't seem to be a commonly held view, but it is a view held by some. Be interested to sort of get your take on what you think on that topic.
Sure. I mean, I think the suggestions that the office is dead are very premature in my view, and certainly we Savills, as I think you're aware, we ran an office fit survey, we call it, which excuse the plug there, but we surveyed 65,000 clients at the start of the pandemic and followed that up with a survey a couple of months ago, and 89% of the respondents to that saw the office feature in their future plans in some shape or form. Now, the vast majority of that 89% were looking at some sort of flexible, agile type working, but actually, the overwhelming majority saw the office playing a role going forward. So, bearing that in mind, I expect to see an improvement in workplace quality. I think ESG is going to be of increasing importance as we move towards 2045's net zero targets. I think that'll encourage a flight to quality for occupiers in terms of moving to better quality office space. They'll have to have space which caters for employee well-being and which encourages employees to come back to the office. The office will have to have a pool to get employees to come back into it. I think workplaces will need to be configured in a different manner and set up to accommodate hybrid working. There's going to be less desks and more collaborative spaces, breakout areas, and spaces to facilitate employee interaction. I think we're expecting to see greater workplace amenity. We're actually looking at a substantial refurbishment of a large office building in Aberdeen at the moment, and amongst your sort of usual things, creche, gym, various others, there was a suggestion the other day that we should probably include some sort of doggy daycare facility there for people who've acquired a dog over the lockdown.
For all the pandemic pets.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely. But I think new technologies are going to continue to provide staff the ability to work where and when they want, and I guess just filtering that through to the workplace, we're expecting to see sort of intelligent space management systems come in, which can manage the space and booking areas to work and all that sort of good stuff. And then I guess beyond that, collecting empirical data to monitor space utilization and all that sort of side of things, so that it's going to be a continually evolving process how the office is used. And actually, I don't think anyone has the right answer right now, and I don't think there is one answer that suits every business. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
But the office will continue to exist.
Sure, in my view, yeah, absolutely. I think what we're going to see less of is poorly specified office space with less amenity, and we're going to see fewer cellular office rooms in favour of more individual focus rooms, etc. And we're going to see less sterile corporate environments and with limited breakout. And I guess we're probably going to see less people walking around wearing suits, I guess, going forward as well. So.
Yeah. And David, I know you've got a lot to say on this topic, because obviously it's your area of specialism, but I'm just going to bring in Paul quickly. So Paul, if we go on the basis that we think that the office is going to continue to exist, what about where that might be located? Do you think we'll see any changes in office space locations, or do you think we'll still be sort of where we're at the moment in terms of where office space tends to be based in Aberdeen?
I think we'll maintain our existing locations, to be honest. But I think as you can move out of Aberdeen, look at the wider area, I think the opportunity for establishing co-working spaces and hubs, I think we're going to see a surge in that type of development coming forward, recognising I don't want to say the limitations of digital connectivity in the North East, but certainly one of the key work streams is City Region deal. And as we obtain greater digital connectivity across the whole region, then I think we're going to kind of see that hybrid approach to working as we move forward. I think we also have to be very mindful of the impact on local facilities and services. I think it's been termed as Zoom shock over the last 18 months, but if you take a population away from a town centre, there is an impact on services, facilities, local retailers, and equally the supply chain associated with it. So I think as we start to kind of, I suppose, move through some of the thought patterns around what future ways of working are, we'll move more towards that hybrid form of working and the stabilisation of our locations for offices. I think we also have to be really mindful of location, about place and about place branding. I think there are examples throughout the country whereby we're starting to see that the work-life balance, the wonderful environments that people are living in and have been working in over the last 18 months, and how that improves people's health and well-being. And I think that's something for us to bear in mind, especially in the North East, because we'll have a phenomenal environment in the North East, and it's definitely a way to promote the North East as a place to live, work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And David, then, so in terms of what you think, I mean, Dan's sort of given some of his ideas, but in terms of what you think we might see more or less of in terms of the office space, how it's fitted out, what it's offering, how it's attracting people in, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. You raised the point or the question around the office potentially being dead, and you heard a lot of high-profile business leaders coming out during the early stages of the pandemic who were suggesting that might be the case. Some of them have publicly come full circle and said, actually, no, that there is definitely a strong need for having an office. One of the biggest drivers for that is, and I think what we've learned over the course of the last year, one of the biggest challenges that employers have faced is, how do you maintain a strong company culture? And when you're working in a remote environment, it's incredibly difficult to be able to achieve that. And company culture is one of the most important aspects of how you drive a business forward, how you attract and retain the best people. So the office really is a physical destination that enables businesses to to illustrate, to live and breathe that company culture. And also as well, you've got, you know, large numbers of people who are joining new businesses for the first time, who have never worked with them before and have yet to meet their colleagues. And training remotely is, as they're already starting to see, has become incredibly challenging as well. So it was mentioned there earlier on that, you know, we're going to start to see the office being more of a, I guess, a collaborative and a learning type hub, which we've started to see examples of that with some of the clients that we're working with. Projects that we were completing just before, just at the beginning of the new year, and we're starting to see that with some, certainly with some of our larger clients who have a number of office spaces across the country. They're taking out large volumes of desking and replacing that with more collaborative spaces and learning facilities. So I've read stats as well saying that, you know, you might see a 40% reduction in the size of office spaces. I think obviously that's something that remains to be seen. And the other thing, and I alluded to earlier on, you know, we're still at a very early stage here, and what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to understand the limitations that people have to actually be able to work from home. You know, we're blessed in parts of the country like the Northeast and other parts of Scotland where, you know, we have wide open spaces, larger homes where we might have office spaces that we can actually work in. If you look at the Southeast, you know, of the UK, for example, where predominantly you've got, you know, where you have younger workforces who live in smaller flats, don't really have that facility to work in. So we've got to address that. One of the things that's being looked at and talked about widely is this discussion around the hub and spoke model. So for those that don't appreciate what that is, so the hub being the central office or the head office, and the spoke being these rural locations where businesses can set up working facilities for people to work in commuter towns, for example, where they might not have the luxury of being able to work from home. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out, particularly, as I said, in the Southeast, because one of the biggest things I think they're going to try and minimize, we've obviously been doing over the course of the pandemic, is minimizing travel, you know, to avoid the spread of the virus, and also to help minimize people's anxiety levels, which again is going to be a big factor, you know, as we start to move back into the office. The one last thing I will also say as well is cleanliness within the office. I think that's going to be a big thing that we're going to, you know, we're going to continue to see HVAC systems, air purification systems, you know, that help to eradicate airborne viruses, and also hand sanitizer stations, which we're all very much used to now.
Yeah, so those will just become the norm.
I think so. I think people have gotten into that habit now of, you know, of cleaning their hands on a regular basis. But
Yeah.
People want to know that they're walking into a safe environment. We've got quite a number of co-working clients who are actively promoting the fact that they have these facilities in place. They have HVAC, air purification systems in place. Gives people that level of comfort that they're walking into a space, that they're, you know, that they're taking all the necessary precautions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I think that's really important. And I guess that's important now as employers are thinking about what the return to the office might look like once the restrictions sort of allow for that. And so, Paul, you sort of touched on this in terms of the impact of the sort of built environment of our cities, and I guess in Aberdeen in particular. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say just around that and what we have to be mindful of around that.
Yeah, I think it's really important touching on the cleanliness aspect, the need for physical distancing, and the fact that, you know, throughout the pandemic we've seen really great, I suppose, great innovation in the city, in particular around spaces for people, creation of outdoor dining areas, and I think a reduction in the width of Union Street in particular to allow buses to flow through, but kind of promoting active travel. I think when we start to look at how we help businesses, how we help retailers diversify, how, you know, they address the change in, I suppose, the function of the city centre and town centres, I think that's really where where I suppose the real change is going to come. So it's not just about decreasing the amount of people who will be present in the town centre, but actually changing the traditional function of a town centre to meet the needs of the population, and again to harness it as the hub, the centre, and how we're going to attract people into the area to ensure that existing businesses remain viable and sustainable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then Dan, in terms of sort of, if you come to you next, in terms of what you're seeing in the market at the moment, and whether you think that might change over the next 10 years or what your thoughts are on that.
In terms of what we're seeing in the market, in terms of the
sort of
demand,
demand for office space in the city centre and elsewhere around Aberdeenshire.
I think Aberdeen is we're seeing a massively increased demand for the sort of higher quality space, less so for the sort of poorer quality. Aberdeen's actually been a victim of its own success in many ways for a number of years, insofar as the market was so strong in Aberdeen that loads of buildings have probably had their economic life extended. And we're actually starting to see now with the slowdown in the requirement for office space, we're starting to see a lot of these buildings coming forward for repurposing, but it's older, poorer quality office space. So we've actually seen a kind of two-tier market develop in Aberdeen. And I would expect to see that continue, whereby you have the older, poorer quality, obsolete office buildings coming forward for repurposing. And at the same time as that, you still have demand from occupiers for offices for the better, higher quality, BREEAM, excellent, very good buildings, and ones which are sustainable. So I guess I expect to see that continue for foreseeable.
And interesting what you say about the amenities and how the office will need to attract people to come in. And if you are going to start, if it's not just banks of desks where people can sit in front of a screen, and why would they if they can do that from home, but you're offering that collaboration space for either sort of one-to-one collaborations or small teams or larger teams, or the whole office to be able to get together, then presumably that changes the space requirements that people have.
Yeah, it does, absolutely, and I don't think there's one. Again, as I said it earlier on, there's no one size fits all to any of this, and I think that's the situation here as well. I mean, I think before the crisis, the concept of having a personal desk was eroding, and it was replaced by a variety of work settings which were effectively defined by the task at hand and the activity. And remote working and the pandemic have really accelerated the agile working move. And KKS Savills, who's our design development and workplace strategy business, have actually produced an excellent paper. I'm using this to plug again, but it's called Time to Transition, which is it's a fantastic read for all things return to work related. And in that study, we predict that the previous standard of 1 to 8 or 10 square meters desk layouts will now probably move to 1 to 12 to 1 to 14 square meters with due to the increased requirement for meeting and team spaces. And I think in there as well, we're seeing that desk sizes, which have been reducing over the past 5 to 10 years, occupiers started adopting a 1.4 meter wide desk as opposed to 1.6 or 1.8 that you've seen in the past. And we predict that the standard going forward will become 1.6, which effectively the size of that desk provides its own sort of natural distancing, which I think will help with office space layouts. So I guess on the basis of that, there's a prediction that employers will provide greater space per head per employee. So a reduction in the number of people coming into the office on a regular basis doesn't necessarily translate in a direct reduction in the floor area requirement, but ultimately it's going to come down to whether occupiers need larger or smaller spaces is going to come down to their own agile working strategy and how they actually use that space.
Yeah, and I think as well, and I know we spoke about this on our pre-call, but if I can just sort of bring the point in, is that actually it's all very well having your theories and your plans and your policies, but some of this is actually, let's get people back and see what they want and what works and what doesn't work, because it's all very well saying we think that we can operate with a little bit less space or much a much reduced floor print capacity, but actually in practice, is that going to work? Do you want to commit to reducing your space before you've actually tried it out in practice? And David, I know you feel quite strongly about that we're just not sort of in a position now to be making such bold decisions, really.
I agree with that as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And I think one of the things that employers are definitely going to have to do, something that we're already in the process of doing at Bureau, is having consistent and regular engagement with staff. We've been engaging with our team. We're not back in the office yet. We're still all working from home, but we've been going through the process of engaging with them to understand their attitudes towards going back into the workplace. And that's going to have to be an ongoing process. Once they're back in, how is it going to impact if you go for this hybrid model, for example, and you've got 90% of the population who don't want to come in on a Monday or a Friday, and they want to come in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So all of these sorts of things are going to have to be looked at. Interestingly as well, I was reading that if you look at some of the nations that came out of the pandemic a lot earlier than others, South Korea, New Zealand, actually the numbers of people working from home has not dropped that much. People are still going back into the offices, almost as much as they were previously. So yeah, we'll just have to continuously monitor and assess. We've got one or two global clients, and they're going through a due diligence process that's going to go on for the next few years before they think they've really defined how they're going to work longer term.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really valid point. And you touched on it earlier, David, around, not everybody is in a position where they have the space to comfortably work from home, or they might have personal circumstances which mean that working from home is difficult. We have to be aware of that and sort of sensitive to that, and mindful of the fact that for some people this has been a really difficult, some people have enjoyed the flexibility and have been able to make it work for them, but for some people it's been a really difficult period of time, and actually once they can get back into the office they will be sort of very happy to do that. I guess that brings us on to our next topic, which was around how is all of this going to affect the way in which we use our homes. And I'd shared with you all that I've been house hunting recently, and pre-pandemic would probably have thought that it would be quite nice to have an office, but more recently have been thinking, well, now I would like to have offices, plural, one for me, one for my husband, that we can work away confidentially, separate from each other, and that doesn't form part of our living space, so I can actually get my dining room table back and my husband's laptop can go elsewhere, and either that being sort of space within the main property, or a garden is big enough to take one of these garden pods, and I know they're sort of increasingly popular, but that has completely changed our search criteria. We're thinking about how we will use our home differently. And so, Dan, I wonder if there's sort of any insights you can share on that from your residential colleagues in the first instance.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, I guess personally, I also bought a house just before the pandemic last year, but fortunately, I had enough room for an office, which we actually converted. We're planning on having an office there anyway. But then my wife started working from home as well, so we've had a period of time where our dining room table has had a laptop plugged on it. So I guess the positive for the last little while has been we haven't been able to have anybody around for dinner anyway. So the dining room's just become an office. But I guess going forward, we expect that to change. But no, our residential team across Scotland are experiencing a period of tremendous activity, and last year was a record-breaking year for Savills residential in Scotland in terms of deal activity, and this year seems on par, perhaps even ahead of that, which is just phenomenal. I think the demand's sort of Scotland wide, and extends into Aberdeen and the northeast of Scotland as well. And according to my residential colleagues, the main drivers for the uptick in activity are applicants have got the flexibility to work from home and are therefore no longer tied to a particular location. So many new applicants who are registering are coming from elsewhere in the UK, and they're attracted by the comparative value for money and quality of life offered in Scotland and Aberdeen City and the Shire. And many are keen to get access to more space indoor and outdoor. And lockdowns change people's perspectives and priorities, and access to a greater amount of space and is a key consideration for many, particularly outdoor space and areas which will facilitate home working. So that kind of ties in with what you were saying about your own views on that as well. And two of the most commonly asked questions we have now from people who are coming in from elsewhere to look at properties in and around Aberdeen is about internet connectivity and commutable distance from an airport or train station in the event that they have to go to the office. So that's I guess tells its own story there. So.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And Paul, I mean, I know you're obviously at Aberdeenshire Council, but previously in your former life at a house builder. So do you think we'll see sort of a change in where houses are being built, or any sort of changes on that front?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably in the last 12 months, we've seen a real change in the types of application that are coming through the planning system in Aberdeenshire. We've seen, the delivery of housing on our allocated sites, so in accordance with our development strategy within the strategic development plan and the local development plan, but equally we've seen a real increase in the number of single housing units and small developments coming through with increased open space, garden ground, but equally incorporating home working space within the design of the units that are coming through. What we're also seeing is the locations changing. So again, moving away from probably suburban Aberdeen, so moving out of the Aberdeen housing market area, but further penetration into the rural housing market area in Aberdeenshire, particularly along the north coast as well, which is really good to see. And again, it's the focus on connectivity, so making sure that we have the digital connectivity to support, I suppose, a resurgence in this type of housing. But what we also have to take account of is that there are many different levers that the planning authority can pull on to not only help businesses and adapt and change, to help town centres recover. So, for example, if we have an increase in the level of vacant office space, there is provision within the Planning Act to introduce master plan consent zones, which would allow us to take away the need to obtain planning permission to convert upper floors and vacant office spaces to residential units. And again, increasing footfall and therefore vibrancy, vitality within town centre, city centre locations, helping to improve the economic activity in those areas. But equally, there's also provision through permitted development rights that have come out this year, which enables vacant or occupied agricultural and forestry buildings to be converted up to 5 houses. So again, I think part of the Scottish Government's remit is to understand the impact of rural depopulation and improve it by pulling on those planning levers. But the main issue, I think, coming out of this is about greater public and private sector collaboration to help both the house building industry and individuals and business owners adapt and change their approach as a result of what we're finding from the pandemic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And David, from your perspective, obviously your business focuses on sort of office space and office furniture, but in terms of what people will be thinking about in terms of their home office space and trying to make sure that that's going to work for them if they are going to spend some of their time working at home, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think from an employer's perspective, one thing I would raise is that they're going to have to address and look at how they're actually risk assessing the home work environment, because as we're going to see or have seen over the last year and moving on into the future, we're going to see a big increase in the number of people who are working from home. By law, you have to risk assess, someone's desk when they're working in an office. that legal responsibility extends into the home if that person has no other place that they have to work in. So one of the things that employers are going to really have to address quite quickly is making sure that their staff have a safe work environment for them to work in. There's probably a lot of people listening in on this call who have been working from all sorts of different work setups at home. I've seen some weird and wonderful ones over the last year. Unfortunately, when we've seen lots of examples as well where either employers will allow staff members to take their desk chair home with them, or they might give them an Amazon gift voucher or a financial donation, to buy some furniture. But unfortunately, that doesn't really go far enough. What they need to make sure is that is it fit for purpose? Can they work there? Do they have enough space to actually work in? So actually being able to risk assess that and demonstrate that will minimize the risk to the employee and to the employer. On the furniture side, there's been lots of developments and innovations coming through. Furniture that's been designed to support people working in smaller working environments, these sorts of things. So yeah, there's lots of innovations that are coming through on that front. Again, going back to the hub and spoke, if they can't work from home, being able to, if they don't want people working in the office all of the time, if businesses are starting to recognize that they are going to maybe reduce the size of their office spaces and actually ask people to work more remotely, then they're going to have to give them the facilities, to enable them to do that. And then finally, you touched on as well the garden pods, and that's something that we're within Bureau doing a lot of at the moment. We've seen a massive increase in demand for clients looking for outdoor office pods that they can place into the back garden. So I think that's something that it'll be interesting to see how that trend evolves over the next few years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's it's just such a fascinating topic, and I think really great that we're having this discussion now. So I think where that gets us to then is the sort of the $1 million question. What do we think the workplace, and by that we're really talking about the office, is going to look like in 10 years' time? So absolutely crystal ball gazing, not going to hold you to this at all. Of course, we might get back together in 10 years and work out if we were right or not, if any of our predictions materialized. But David, if I can ask you to sort of set out your vision first, that would be really great.
Sure. Yeah, I think it'll definitely be a much more positive working environment. One of the positive things to have come out from this horrible pandemic will be that I think longer term we will have a more positive work environment where well-being, people's well-being will be addressed by employers. Flexible working has been evolving for a number of years, but I think and that's really been done to support modern society and modern ways of living. So flexible working hours and places as to where you work, I think we'll definitely see that continue and thrive. And hopefully that will put less strain on commuting to work and from work, which again will have a positive impact on the environment. Human interaction is vital for people's well-being and also for the bottom line of businesses, because it's shown that it helps with productivity. So the office is certainly not going anywhere. And we touched on earlier about creating this sort of more collaborative learning hub environment. Cleaner offices, definitely. I think we'll see more of that. And more sustainably designed offices with more sustainably performing occupiers as well.
Yeah. And just on that, I know you've got this really lovely term, which is called human moments, isn't it? That's sort of what you're when you're thinking about your design, it's all around the human moment and the human connection, which I think is a really good way of looking at it.
Yeah. And that's something that's that's been around for a number of years. Bureau, we play a part in that in terms of bringing furniture solutions to support the design community who are designing these environments, and I can only see that I think pre-pandemic you were seeing a lot of businesses and organizations who were embracing that, but equally there were a lot that were adverse to it. particularly within industries like the legal profession. But now, because of everything that's gone on, we've all learned that actually we can work in this different way. So I think the barriers to that, or the resistance to that, sorry, is now going to reduce, and we'll see that becoming a lot more widespread.
Yeah, great. And Paul, then, can I ask you to sort of set out your thoughts or your predictions?
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. I think very similar to what David and Dan have been speaking about throughout today. I have a really positive outlook for the future. I think right now we're in a really positive position. We shouldn't rush to make any significant decisions about how we're going to change the way we work. We need to take cognizance of all the changes that are happening across many different sectors, but equally the focus on people, the focus on place, the delivery of the 20-minute neighbourhood. I think that all bodes well for greater cross-sector collaboration, and certainly a much more people-focused approach to the workplace and how we deliver services, facilities, and how businesses operate. So I think we're in a really positive position now, and I think as long as we do take the time to make those sustainable decisions, I think it can only get better over the next 10 years.
Yeah, great. And Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a huge amount to add beyond what the guys have said on that again, but I think with my view, physical space simply can't be matched as a place to learn and grow and build teams and a strong collaborative culture within businesses, and places of work will need to. Employers rather will need to give people a reason to come into their office, and so I think initially at least employees will need to feel safe when they come into the office. So employee health and well-being will become even more prevalent for a period of time. I think the focus on ESG and the drive towards sustainability will continue to drive property investment decisions, and that will continue to drive the sort of flight to quality for most occupiers. And the function of the office is going to change for many. There's no doubt about that. And it's going to become, as we've discussed, a place for collaboration and creativity, and where employees can come together and share experiences. And less desks will become the norm, with more space dedicated towards collaborative spaces. So beyond that, I think it'll be interesting to see where things go, but I haven't. There's nothing else coming out of my crystal ball at the moment, so I'm not entirely sure how it will be.
No lottery numbers for the weekend, unfortunately.
No, sadly not. Sadly not.
And I mean, so one of the things I had also said that we would touch upon is what all of this means for how we engage our workforces, and the terms on which we engage them. And obviously I will take this topic, but I had been thinking that if we, would we see, for example, a complete abandonment of the traditional employer-employee with a contract of employment model to something that's radically different to that? And I think based on our discussion that we've had today and the sort of the research that goes alongside it, I just don't see that happening. I think we will very much continue with that traditional employer-employee model. Yes, there will be things like the gig economy and other platforms that will be used in certain businesses where appropriate, but I think we won't see this massive departure from that more typical model. And similarly, in terms of the terms in which we engage our workforce, certainly so far as contracts of employment are concerned, we might have in there clauses or wording around home working, depending on where we've got to within our own businesses around the flexibility and whether we're moving to sort of a more hybrid model or not. But again, I don't see their sort of contracts of employment sort of looking radically different. One concern I think clients, employers will need to be thinking about is just if it is going to be a more permanent feature of the working relationship and the working environment. David's obviously touched on the health and safety point already, and I think that is a really important point. It's a really important point now. People have been working at home for a long time. We need to make sure that they're working in a safe way, and that risk assessments have been done, albeit that can be tricky, but that those are being done, and that people have the ability to flag if they have concerns about the way that they're working, if it's causing them any pain in particular, for example. We'd want to get that seen to sooner rather than later. So that's something. I guess there's also a piece around sort of data protection and confidential information, and just making all of that sure that all of that is kept securely. So how do we enable our workforce to do that? Again, recognizing that not everybody will have a separate office space. Even if you have a separate office space, it's unlikely you've got a lock on the door that you will lock at the end of the day. So just thinking around that, I could see in terms of sort of data protection considerations, particularly in terms of data breach, if there was to be a personal data breach that had to be notified to the ICO, for example. So I think that will probably become a consideration, and probably something that we might start to see factored into the contract of employment. If there is to be sort of hybrid working or some sort of home working model, we might also want to be thinking about the ability to bring that to an end. So we might be saying, yes, there is this flexibility, but to the extent that we have concerns about your ability to perform in the role, then in that situation, we might actually want to have you working in an office surrounded by colleagues, where you can learn more easily, where you can consult with peers or superiors more easily, and having the ability to do that, as opposed to it being a sort of more enshrined in your contract that you are entitled to work from home, and making that sort of conversation a bit more difficult. I think fundamentally we won't see a massive change, and I would just echo the point that all of you have made earlier around this engaging with your workforce and listening to what it is that they want and need from the office space. And want and need are probably two different things, and we're having those discussions just now within Brodies. We've got various working groups that have been set up so that we can sort of canvass the workforce and genuinely listen to what it is that they think they would like from the office space, but also what it is that they want the office space to deliver. And I think that's going to be so important, because people have got used to working in this particular way and in this particular environment over a long period of time. And as I said earlier, some people will really have enjoyed it and will have been able to make it work for them, but for others it will have been a really difficult time. So we really need to be listening to that and making sure that when we do our return to work plans, if we're not already back in our office space, that we're sort of taking stock on that. But also, as David said, that it's not just a sort of taking stock once and then that's the end of the story, that actually we're going back and listening on a regular basis thereafter, so that during the next 10-year period it's probably sort of a bit of a moving feast, and that we're keeping on track of that. So that was just what I was going to cover off on that last point. In terms of the questions, I'll just go to the Q&A tab now. If you do have questions, please feel free to submit those now, and I'll put them to the panelists. I'll start with this question, which is that a recent McKinsey survey suggests that 1 in 4 employees are actively considering moving, while 82% will be tempted for a more empathetic organisation. Dan mentioned people as a driver. So does the panel think that a wellness culture will equal talent retention? David, if we maybe start with you on that one.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I think if there are companies out there, that thinking that they perhaps don't need to consider these things, then I think there's a real risk that they could end up falling behind in terms of, being able to attract and retain the best people. I think there was, things like, 71%, I was reading 71% of people that are looking to buy homes in London right now are looking to buy in more rural locations. And again, going back to the consistent reviewing of the workforce, understanding changes that they're making to their lives post-pandemic, we have to be able to be aware of those continuously and adapt to them. And so I think the businesses out there that are really taking this on the front foot and understanding how this is impacting their staff, I think are the ones that are going to prosper out of all of this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Dan, your thoughts on that sort of retention point?
Yeah, I haven't really got much to add again beyond what David said, but clearly people are the most important asset that any business has, and ultimately keeping people happy and making sure that people are feeling that they have they are in the best place they can be is critical to any business. So ultimately, if we are in this situation which we're in at the moment, where where flexible working has become a part of most organisations, then you need to be offering your staff the ability to do that. Otherwise, you do have the risk of attrition, don't you? So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky that I've got a friend who works for a technology company, and she spent some time working for them in New York, and I was able to visit her in her office one day, and my mind was blown as to what they had. You know, we were excited at Brodies when we were getting sparkling water on tap, but I mean, this was on a whole other level in terms of, I mean, the office for starters was huge. It was a whole block in Manhattan, so there were scooters that you could, like little scooter stations, and you could scoot about the office on scooters. And at one point there was a sort of fireman's pole that you could go between the two stories. The sort of sweets and chocolates and cakes and snacks and stuff was unbelievable. But is that what we're really, is that where we're headed in terms of sort of making the office an attractive place for people to go? Is that what we're talking about? Or is that technology companies just sort of being very extreme on what they offer?
I think there needs to be reasons for employees to come into the offices, but I can't imagine any legal firms in Aberdeen having scooters in their offices, to be honest with you. So apologies for that.
I'm not seeing it.
Yeah.
What do you think, David?
I think that's something, we work with a lot of tech clients, and predominantly they have younger workforces, and so it's how do you attract, and they occupy such a competitive space with regards to recruitment, and it's one-upmanship in terms of how can you attract and retain the best people. I live just outside Edinburgh, and Edinburgh's a recognised tech hub in the UK, but they have a massive challenge on their hands. Even before the pandemic, with regards to the volume of people that are available in this area. So there's all sorts of things that they're continuously looking at in terms of what they can introduce. I think the next thing will be is how do they want to work now? How has their attitudes changed? And being able to adapt to that is going to be crucial.
Yeah, I mean, I seem to remember one of the things they had was like these they were like screens, but they were like on sort of robot wheels, and so they could sort of, somebody could control it, that it comes up to your desk. I presume you plugged in like a desk location, it would plug up to your desk, and then you were like calling your colleagues in London on this little screen which had just arrived at the side of your desk, which, as I say, my mind was completely blown. But it's an interesting point, isn't it, in terms of sort of that hybrid working, and how do you make that work if some people are in the office and some people are at home? What's the etiquette around sort of hybrid meetings, and how all of that will work will be sort of a challenge.
I was actually reading something about that this morning, which was talking about hybrid, and I can't remember which organisation it was now, but they had actually put in place a procedure that if anybody was dialing into a meeting remotely, a team meeting, then everybody had to dial in remotely, whether you were in the office or not, because they didn't want to have any sort of distinction between people in the office and out of the office, because they didn't want anybody feeling like they were being hard done by because they were either chosen to work from home or in the office. So.
Yeah, no, it is. That's going to be interesting. I'm conscious of the time, so I think I'll wrap up the discussion there, if that's okay. But I think all I need to do is thank our guests very much indeed for their participation and contribution this morning. I was delighted that you all agreed to be as part of our panel, because I think with all of your relevant backgrounds, we really have been able to give a very balanced sort of view, and looking at it through sort of three quite different lenses. So thank you very much for joining this morning, David, Dan and Paul, and thank you all to you for watching. I hope you've found it useful, and we'll send the recording round afterwards. And if you've got any questions, of course you can get in touch, but otherwise I'll wish you a very good afternoon. Thank you.